Okay, we now start with the market risk, the first topic here in the FRM part 2. So this is like a continuation from FRM part 1 and most of it is revision. So estimation of market risk measures such as value at risk will form the heart of market risk. Value at risk identifies the probability that losses will be greater than a pre-specified threshold level. So if we say that uh, we have to evaluate and calculate what using historical or parametric models, then you should be ready for that. Now, in the parametric model in this chapter, our focus would be on normal and log normal distribution. One drawback of war that is that it does not estimate the tail loss or the returns in the tails. The expected shortfall, however, estimates the loss in the tail, that is after war has been breached, by averaging at different level. And covariate risk measure incorporate personal risk aversion across the entire distribution and more general than the expected shortfall. Quantile plot are used to identify specific, visually inspect and to understand which specifications of the distribution we have taken belongs to. So we can visually inspect and find out if an empirical distribution matches a theoretical distribution. So for a normal one, it would be a straight line. So when we move ahead and we study the very basic meaning of war, we should understand that we can calculate returns in various ways, and so when we look at the historical simulation approach, it is the simplest and the most straightforward war method, and it it simply takes the order of return from largest to smallest, and it find out the percentile rank in a way. So more generally, the observation that determines war are those historical observations, and then we take a confidence interval, and then we find out whether what is the probability, or there is only like 5% probability that our loss field is going to exceed a particular level. So for example, if we have a sample of 1000 point that corresponds to a war at 95% confidence interval, then this means that only 5% or 50 of those observations would fall in the tail distribution, and 51st order loss would separate the 5% loss. So when we look at it again, and with 1000 observation, and when we say that we have a 95% confidence interval, there is a certain level of arbitrariness in how the order observation relate to war. So in other words, war should be a 50th observation, that is alpha, or the confidence, into n, and the 51st observation, uh, or some combination of these two. So using the 51st observation was the approximation for war and the method used in the assigned reading. However, in the exam, uh, we the way in which it has been calculated is the 50th observation. So that is how it is done. Now, when we look at the normal distribution here, and if the distribution is closely approximated by standard normal distribution, the VOR is 1.65, and that is the 5% of critical value from the Z table. And since VOR is one tail, the entire significant level of 5% is on the left tail of the return distribution. So I think this was what we studied in part 1. So when we and this is where we start with the parametric estimates, and in parametric estimates we have normal VOR and log normal VOR. So we assume the distribution to be normally distribution, and we have a mean and a standard deviation, and suppose we need to calculate VOR, then it would be like uh, mean plus minus standard deviation. So that would be like minus mean plus 1.65 into standard deviation. So that's what the level becomes for 95%. So what we are looking here is that we are looking for a var, and we are looking for how many standard deviations we are going away. So what is like uh, we are 95% sure that uh, var will be less than this, or the profit and loss will be more than this and will not drift in the left region. So that is uh, minus mean plus minus the standard deviation into the z-score. So that becomes our var. Now, if we look at it in an intuitive way, and the way in which I learned it, it was mean plus minus z-score into standard deviation, but we put a negative sign to the entire term so that the answer that we get is negative, because a profit of minus 23 is equivalent to a loss of 23. So that sign convention needs to be taken care of. And when we move to the logarithmic var, and when we calculate that, we have the formula, which is var at alpha percent is equal to p into t minus 1, and 1 minus e to the power mu r minus mean minus standard deviation into z-score. So all we are doing is that we are using that the same thing into an exponential term, and this time we are not having the negative sign. So whatever is in the exponential will come out to be negative, and 1 minus that exponential which has the negative term to get the log normal var. So the signs are just indicative of a profit of minus 23 or a loss of plus 23. So don't get confused by that. And when we move ahead in the same direction, we look at the expected shortfall. And one of the major limitation of var here is that it does not tell us the investor the amount or magnitude of the actual loss. So var also provide a maximum value we can lose for a given confidence. An estimated shortfall provide an estimated of the tail loss by averaging var by averaging the vars for increasing confidence level. Specifically, the tail mass divided into n equals slicing, and corresponding n minus 1 var are computed. So we calculate various var, and we take an average of that var to understand what we are going to do. So in a way we take out those var, so whatever that those var comes to be, and like if we talk from 95%, then we'll start from 96%, and the z-score would be 1.7 up to 99%, where the z-score would be 2.3, and we average them and we get 2.03. So the average for computed var would be nearly 2, which is the expected shortfall, and and this is how we move around it. So that was how to look at the expected shortfall thing. Again, this is the revision of part 1 of what we did in part 1. So more generic version of var or estimated shortfall is known as coherent risk measure, which is the weighted average of quantile of loss distribution, where the weights are user specific based on risk aversion. Expected shortfall as well as var is specific case of coherent risk measure. When modeling the estimated shortfall case, the weighting function is set into 1 minus confidence interval, and inverse of that for all tail loss, and all other quantiles will have weight equal to 0. So under the expected shortfall estimator, the tail is divided into probability slices and then multiplied by corresponding quartiles. Under the more general coherent risk measure, the entire distribution is divided into equal probability slices weight by more general risk aversion weighting function. So we'll slice everything, and we'll have a weighting function in the measurement of coherent risk. So for the entire return distribution, which is divided into n minus 1 equal probabilities, and we'll slice them at, say, suppose 10%, and we'll create those quartiles. And when we look at when we look at 10% or 20% interval, then we are going to check out those quartiles. So each quartile is weighted by a specific risk aversion function to arrive at the end of coherent risk measure. So coherent risk measure is more sensitive to the choice of the number of readings than the expected shortfall, but it will converge to risk measures for a sufficiently large observation. So as n increases, the quantiles will further be divided into tails, where more extreme values of the distributions are located. So we have this coherent risk measure, And just to revise it, it is the weighted average of the quantile of loss distribution where the weights are user specific based on individual risk, and expected shortfall is a special case of coherent risk. When modeling the expected shortfall, the weight function is set for all tail losses and other quartiles have a weight of 0. So that's how both of them are risked. And now when we look at the standard error for the coherent risk, the estimates are less precise here, and in the coherent risk measure and have limited practical value. So we'll calculate a standard error for all coherent risk, and if we have a sample size of n and a bin of width of h and a quantile f, bin width is adjusted by the interval, sometimes calls the bins in histogram, and computing standard error is done by realizing the square root of variance of quantile is equal to standard error of the quantile. After finding the standard error, a confidence interval for risk measure such as VOR is constructed like q minus standard error into q. This is something that we did in the regression thing. So it's the same standard error formula that we looked at. So just to revise you, that would be we'll have VOR in between and q plus standard error into z score. So we'll have a confidence interval for risk measure of the VOR. So this is where we see that the large sample size, the smaller the standard error is and narrower the confidence interval, which is a question or which you have to always remember. This is something general for all of them, that as we increase the size, the error decreases, the confidence interval become narrower. And if we increase the bin size and hold everything constant, this will again increase the probability mass and reduce p, the probability of the left tail, and again the standard error will decrease. So when will the standard error decrease is one thing that you can see in the exam. So the standard error decreases in general. It's a good thing when we increase the bin size h, holding everything constant, or by taking a large sample. So that's it. So suppose P indicates the tail loss probability, the estimator becomes less precise, and that's how it works. So a little complex area and not a focus of the main thing. Now we move to the quantile plot, which is our next measure. So once we are through with that, we are going to look at that. The other method that we have here in the non-parametric approach and bootstrapping. So the non-parametric approach does not take restrictive assumption about the underlying distribution like parametric does, that is the distribution is normal or log normal, and non-parametric estimates let the data drive the estimation. So the flexibility of these models make them excellent for VOR estimation, especially tail events are sparse. So we'll take out those data and focus on that data. So bootstrapping method is simple and intuitive estimate procedure. In essence, bootstrapping techniques draw sample from the original data, records the VOR from the particular sample, and returns the data. The procedure is repeated over and over and records multiple sample VOR. Since the data is always returned to the data set, this produces akin to sampling with replacement. The best VOR estimate from the full data is the set of average of sample VOR. This procedure can be performed to estimate expected shortfall. Each sample will draw its own estimated shortfall by sliding the tail region into n slices and averaging VOR at each level. And this is exactly the same procedure described in previous topic. So similarly, the best estimate of the expected shortfall for original zeta is the average of all sample expected shortfall. Now when we look at historical simulation using non-parametric density estimation, we see that we use the historical simulation just for its simplicity, but the discreteness of data does not allow for estimating VOR data points. So if there were 100 historical observations, then straightforward VOR estimate was 95, 96 and so on. However, this method is unable to incorporate confidence interval of 95.5. For example, more general n observation, the historical simulation will allow for n different confidence level. So one of the advantage of non-parametric density estimation is that underlying distribution is free from restrictive assumption. Therefore, the existing data points can be used to smooth the data points to allow war at different confidence interval. The simplest adjustment is to connect the midpoint between the successive histogram bar in the original data set, and uh, this is called the surrogate density function. And by connecting the midpoints of the lower bar, we receive an area from an upper bar which loses an equal amount of area. In the total area, no area is lost, only displaced. And we still have the probability distribution function, just the modified shape. The shaded area in figure 1 represents a possible confidence interval which can be utilized regardless of the size of the data set. The major improvement of this non-parametric approach over traditional historical simulation is that VOR can be calculated for continuous point. Following the logic, we can see that linear adjustment in a simple solution to interval problem. A more complicated adjustment would allow connecting curves rather than lines between successive bar to capture the characterization of data. So uh, uh, what we were looking here is that we connected all those midpoints of those bar diagrams that we had in front of us. Then we move to the weighted historical simulation approach, and we have four types here, which is the age weighted, the volatility weighted, the correlation weighted, and the filtered historical simulation. And the age weighted, of course, as the name suggests, the obvious adjustment to equal weighting assumption used in historical is weight to weight recent more and distant less. So this is one method which will have different weights, and something that is 1 year old will have a different weight, something that's 3 year old will have a different weight, and so on. The decay parameter, which is lambda, can be taken from 0 to 1, where the closest value 1 indicates to slow decay, and since all weighting must sum to 1, we must make sure that we have that in a kind of a geometric mean series, which is 1 plus lambda square plus lambda cube, and the sum of those geometric series should be equal to 1. So that's the way in which we'll pick this up. Volatility weighted historical simulation is a way to weight individual observation by volatility rather than proximity to the date, and this was introduced by Hull and White to incorporate changing volatility in risk estimation. So the intuition here is that if the reset volatility has increased, the historical data will underestimate the current level. Similarly, if current volatility is reduced, the impact of older data will overstate the current level. So this process is captured in the in an expression where we have estimation for VOR on day t. The expression is achieved by adjusting each daily return on t upward or downward based on the current volatility estimate by GARC, or exponential weighting moving average model relative to current volatility forecast. So thus the volatility adjusted is replaced by an expression, and if the current volatility exceeds on day I. So VOR and ES, another coherent risk measure, can be calculated by the usual way after substituting historical return and volatility adjusted return, and this has got many advantages over the other methods that we use. And then we move on to the correlation weighted historical simulation. This method incorporates updated correlation between asset and pair. This process is more complicated than volatile weighting, but it follows same basic principle. Since the aim does not require us to calculate us, we'll understand that we have to need a variance covariance matrix that need to be adjusted, and by multiplying historical return, and we'll look at variance covariance matrix, and it could look like well, the diagonal element are various and the other elements are covariances between each element. So this is the variance covariance method. Then we have the filtered historical simulation, which is the most comprehensive and most complicated. The process combines historical model with conditional volatility model. Thus method contains both a traction of traditional with sophisticated inclusions like changing volatility. The model forecast volatility for each day is sample period, and volatility will be standardized by dividing the return. Bootstrapping is used to simulate the returns, which incorporates the current volatility table. So in sum, the filtered historical assumes bootstrapping combined with traditional historical simulation and rich volatility modeling. This results then sensitive to changing market and can predict losses outside the historical range. So these were the four methods of historical simulation. I hope you like this video. Thank you for watching this, and have a nice time.